There was a study conducted about corporal punishment in schools in America. Now, ever since the coronavirus pandemic happened, a lot of our children have been pulled out of school. Matter of fact, my daughter's school, they had a conversation today about the kids, and the parents got to vote on, do they want to go back to in-person instruction or do they want to do virtual? And the 90% of the parents wanted virtual. And that's when, the parents are in control of the school. And I love the school so much that my daughter's in. But when you come to public school, you got these politicians making decisions. And I don't think politicians should be making decisions about your children whatsoever. That is the job of parents completely. But in this story, the study came out about a correlation between the number of the historical lynchings in an area and corporal punishment in schools. And it said corporal punishment is outlawed, of course, in 19 states and is rarely used in those areas. It said, but there are places where it's still common practice. And it said that the most common method is hitting a student on the behind with a wooden paddle. Now, it said a group of researchers compared data on the frequency of schoolyard corporal punishment in 10 southern states and compared it to the lynching database. It said they defined corporal punishment is most common in areas where it had a relatively high number of lynchings occurring between 1865 and 1950. Now, of course, 1865 is the year of the Emancipation Proclamation, but also the ratification of the 13th Amendment in December of that year. And then, after that, of course, we suffered a lot of racialized violence, terrorism, actually, to black people just trying to get out of slavery and do for ourselves. There's no greater terrorist than the white supremacists based off of, the history of America. But they want to, talk about that. They always want to hide their history. They don't want to teach it. They don't want you to speak about it, whatsoever. But it is the history of America. It is a American history. And we can't turn our eyes from American history whatsoever. Because if we don't learn history, as they say, you could be doomed to repeat it. But they said that it's also a common practice where evangelical Christianity is heavily practiced and educational attainment is lower. So basically, a lot of times your poorer areas and where, these churches are ruling things, right? But, there's been a fundamental change that's happening in America that people are not going to these church houses no more because they really don't, have their usefulness. They're not focusing on what's right and what God wants. They're focusing on, jackleg preaching and collecting tithes and love offerings. I always tell people this, you can donate to us once a month and we don't even ask you for 10% of your income. I said, not at all. I said, you could join our website, AfricanDiasporaNews.org for $9.99 a month. And that's not 10% of your income. You get what I'm saying? Or donate on Patreon or whatever. But these people, these church houses want 10% of your income. Every dime you get, they want 10%. That's a lot of money. But they said 90% of the schools, districts in Alabama, Arkansas, and Mississippi reported at least one school used the punishment, and black students are more likely than their white counterparts, as usual, to be hit. We know this. They said from the lynching in that particular state history, it said the odds of African-American child goes up by 6%, while the number for only white kids is 4%. Now, they said they had suspect that the schools in the counties with more pronounced histories of racial violence and social control, it said where physical pain has been used to discipline and punish marginalized populations and more likely to employ corporal punishment and disproportionately impose the punishment on black students today. They said Mississippi, of course, had 700 lynchings in this time period. And they said, even though that's we were removed by almost 100 years from that, nothing is changing on how they're treating black people. But let me tell you something. The coronavirus was the best blessing for our black children, because for years I've been reporting on stories of how our children are treated from their hair, teachers, being racist toward them, just, race soldiers in the schools, just doing anything they want to, beating our children, dragging them on the floor by their hair, doing whatever they want. And trust me, the coronavirus pandemic was a blessing to black children. At least for a few months, these children wasn't subjected to a system of indoctrination and racism. You understand what I'm saying? They wasn't dealing with these racist administrators and these racist teachers. And they've been actually at home learning, which they have been in a more of a safe environment by doing so. Now they try to say, oh, well, they need to go to school because kids going to be abused and this and that and the third. Listen, this whole system is made of abuse. Our kids are abused every time you go to the schoolhouse. What are you talking about? But our children going to school, even virtual. You know, some parents have said, I'm not sending my kids back. I'm homeschooling, rightfully so. Coronavirus stirred that up in a lot of people because you was kind of forced to homeschool your child to a point. And I would say to black parents especially, continue the virtual learning. Do homeschool. Remove your children out of a system that's not built for them to thrive in anyway. It's not. The only time I'm cool with a school, unless it's schools that's controlled and ran by us. That's the only time I'm really cool with it. I do not like the system, especially of education here. I refuse to put my child in this system of education. It's not education, it's indoctrination, completely. I want my child, in which I'm happy, she's learning and progressing pretty good. And that's what we need to focus on, creating more schools for our children. I've always been a big proponent of schools because I understand that education and the right guidance and actually teaching them what they need is going to make them be more productive for our community. Because this school system don't make our kids productive for crap. It don't. But leave me a comment, let me know what you think about the situation that's, with this particular study. Of course, some people may say, I knew that already, but some people don't know. So we can't say that everybody knows something, but this is more evidence to say we need to homeschool our children as black people, because if they're not going to treat you right, then why do you think they're going to educate your child and treat them right as well?